Roller coasters are built to thrill, towering drops, high-speed turns, and heart-stopping loops that make riders scream with both fear and excitement. But sometimes, those screams turn tragically real. Behind the flashing lights and the roar of steel, a few rides have ended not in laughter, but in horror. Today, we're diving into the 5 most terrifying roller coaster deaths ever in real-life tragedies that shook amusement parks around the world.
New tonight out of Arlington, a woman has died after falling off of a roller coaster.
Six Flags Over Texas confirms the woman was riding the Texas Giant coaster just after 6:30 this evening when she fell.
It was a warm summer night at Six Flags Over Texas, July 19th, 2013. Families wandered between rides, the smell of funnel cakes in the air, the hum of roller coasters echoing across the park. Among them was 52-year-old Rosa Ayala Esparza, visiting for the very first time. She was with her daughter and son-in-law, smiling, soaking in the joy of the moment. None of them knew that in just a few minutes their lives would shatter forever. As the night began to wind down, Rosa wanted one last ride, just one more thrill before heading home. They made their way to the new Texas Giant, a towering hybrid of steel and wood that loomed above the park like a monster in waiting. Recently renovated to be taller, faster, and deadlier than ever before, the coaster promised a rush unlike anything else. Rosa, ever the brave one, stepped forward without hesitation. She climbed into the third car, pulled down her safety harness, and tried to settle her nerves, but something didn't feel right. People around her would later remember that moment, the way Rosa shifted uneasily in her seat, tugging at the restraint that didn't seem to lock the way it should. "Is it secure?" she asked a nearby park employee. The worker smiled, brushing off her concern. "If you heard it click, you're fine." That single sentence, meant to calm her, would haunt everyone who heard it. The ride began its climb. Slow, steady, mechanical clanks pulled the train higher into the twilight. From the ground, it looked beautiful, a giant against the Texas sky. But inside car 3, Rosa was holding her breath. Something felt off. The bar pressed too loosely across her lap. As the coaster reached its first drop, witnesses said they saw her body jolt, her arms flying out for balance. Then came the turns. Sharp, whipping, brutal. Her daughter, seated nearby, could hear screams, but not the kind of screams that come from excitement. These were screams of terror. When she turned to look, her heart stopped. Rosa was slipping. She was twisted, nearly upside down, her head dangling low, her feet fighting against gravity. Passengers behind her reached out in panic, shouting, stretching their arms, but it was too late. The coaster was already climbing again, faster this time, the roar of the tracks drowning out the chaos inside the car. And then, in one horrifying instant, Rosa was gone, thrown from the ride. Her family watched helplessly as her body disappeared over the side, vanishing from view in a blur of steel and screams. By the time paramedics reached the scene, there was nothing left to save. Rosa's body had struck a metal beam, the impact so devastating it scattered debris and tissue across the rooftop below. The scene was gruesome beyond comprehension. It took emergency crews over an hour to recover her remains. In the aftermath, as investigators combed through the wreckage, a chilling picture emerged. Employees quietly admitted they had noticed Rosa's restraint wasn't fully secured, that it sat higher than it should have, but no one stopped the ride. The park's official statement claimed there was no mechanical failure, insisting everything functioned as designed. Yet whispers began to surface that the very same ride had malfunctioned earlier that week, that others had nearly slipped from their seats. One woman even came forward to say that her daughter had almost fallen out of the same car just days before Rosa's death. She had warned park staff, but nothing changed. The police eventually ruled the tragedy an accident. No criminal charges, no one to blame, just silence. For Rosa's family, that silence was unbearable. They filed a lawsuit, not for money, but for truth. For the mother, the grandmother, the woman whose last moments were spent in terror while everyone else screamed for fun. 2 months later, the new Texas Giant reopened. The ride had new seatbelts, new restraints, and no mention of Rosa. No memorial, no acknowledgement. Just the same music, the same lights, the same laughter echoing where she took her final breath.
The Batman roller coaster remained closed Monday at Six Flags Over Georgia, 2 days after a teen was killed by the ride. Police and park officials say 17-year-old Asia LaShawn Ferguson climbed 2 fences surrounding a restricted area.
On June 28, 2008, Asia LaShawn Ferguson, 4, just 17 years old, was at Six Flags Over Georgia with friends from his church group. His parents were somewhere nearby, smiling at the sight of their son, alive with energy and joy. Asia wasn't just another teenager. He was the kind of person who drew people in. Bright, kind, always smiling. A church kid, a basketball dreamer. The group spent the day chasing thrills, racing from ride to ride, daring each other to take on the scariest ones. Eventually, they found themselves standing before one of the park's crown jewels, Batman, the ride, a sleek blur of black and yellow steel. It towered above them like a beast, twisting and roaring through the air. To most, it was a thrill. To Asia and his friends, it was a challenge. But somewhere amid the excitement and noise, something went wrong. Asia and a friend somehow got separated from the rest of the group. Maybe it was confusion. Maybe curiosity. No one knows. They wandered off, following the wrong path, their laughter fading as they stepped closer to danger without realizing it. Before long, they found themselves near a restricted area, a place fenced off and plastered with warning signs. 2 fences stood between them and the ride, both 6 feet tall, both meant to keep people out. But teenagers rarely think the worst could ever happen to them. Some say Asia climbed over to grab a hat that had blown off. Others think he was just trying to take a shortcut back to the parking lot. Whatever the reason, the moment his shoes hit the ground on the other side, he had unknowingly stepped into a death trap. Beneath the twisting steel of Batman, the ride, the air pulsed with the sound of speeding wheels. The coaster roared by every few seconds. Riders above screamed in delight, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding below. And then it happened. There was no warning, no time to react. Asia was struck. The impact was catastrophic, the kind of hit no human could survive. Witnesses froze, their screams cutting through the air as the reality of what they'd seen began to sink in. One moment, there was a boy full of laughter. The next, silence. An off-duty Marietta police officer nearby sprinted toward the scene, radioing for help. Park security arrived within moments. Paramedics followed, but there was nothing they could do. Asia LaShawn Ferguson, son, friend, dreamer, was gone before anyone could even say his name. As investigators examined the scene, they found the truth staring back at them. The warning signs were there. The fences were there. The ride had been functioning perfectly. There was no mechanical error, no faulty design, just a single, irreversible mistake. The coroner later confirmed what everyone already knew in their hearts. Asia died instantly from blunt force trauma. His death was ruled an accident, but for those who loved him, it was anything but accidental. It was senseless, cruel, a moment that shattered countless lives. His father later spoke through tears, describing his son as the light of their home. And then, just like that, he was gone. Six Flags shut down Batman, the ride after the tragedy, keeping it closed while investigators combed through every inch of the area. The park promised to make changes. Taller fences, brighter signs, stronger warnings. But those who stood there that day knew the truth. No barrier could ever keep heartbreak out.
14th of June 1986 is a date that shocked theme park fans worldwide after a horrific roller coaster accident which became Canada's worst ever theme park disaster.
It was a Saturday evening, June 14th, 1986, when the air inside West Edmonton Mall was filled with laughter echoing through Galaxyland, one of the world's most extraordinary indoor amusement parks. Among the flashing rides and shrieks of joy stood a monster of steel, the Mindbender. It wasn't just another coaster. It was the pride of Canada, the world's tallest indoor roller coaster, a triple looping marvel that promised pure adrenaline and defied everything riders thought possible inside 4 mall walls. That night, hundreds gathered beneath its glowing yellow tracks, watching train after train roar through the loops. twisting, spinning, and vanishing into tunnels of light and shadow. For the 16 passengers who climbed aboard just after 8:00 p.m., it was supposed to be the highlight of their evening. A few minutes of heart-racing fun before heading home. None of them could have known that they were stepping onto what would become the scene of Canada's deadliest amusement park tragedy. As the train began its climb, the sound was mechanical perfection. The rhythmic clank of steel against steel, the symphony of anticipation. Riders screamed as they dove through the first and second loops, laughter and fear mixing into one electric roar. But as the train barreled toward its final loop, something went wrong. Witnesses later recalled hearing a strange metallic rattle, a sound like bolts struggling to hold against impossible pressure. The fourth car at the back of the train began to sway, violently shaking as it entered a curve. Unknown to everyone on board, the wheel assembly beneath it had failed. A critical set of bolts had sheared off, sending the car off balance, teetering between the rails. And then, in the blink of an eye, the impossible happened. The car derailed. The train surged ahead, dragging the damaged car along the track. Sparks flew. Metal screamed. The riders inside that fourth car were tossed and jerked violently, their lap bars no longer holding them in place. As the coaster climbed into the third and final loop, the friction from the broken car slowed its speed. It didn't have enough momentum to make it through. The train hung for a moment in the air and then began to roll backward. Seconds later, it slammed into a concrete pillar. The impact was catastrophic. The car twisted violently, and 4 passengers were thrown from the ride. Their bodies hit the hard surface below with devastating force. In the chaos that followed, onlookers screamed as the ride ground to a halt. 3 of the passengers were killed instantly: Tony Mandrake, his fiancée Cindy Sims, and David Seeger. A fourth, Rod Cho, was somehow still alive, but only barely. He had shattered both legs, crushed his shoulder, and broken nearly every rib on one side of his body. He lay hidden in the wreckage, groaning faintly as rescue crews rushed to the scene. When the emergency lights flooded the area, the full horror became clear. What had moments ago been a symbol of engineering brilliance was now a scene of destruction. Twisted metal, blood on the concrete, people screaming. The Mindbender, the ride built to amaze, had become the ride that would haunt Canada forever. The investigation that followed was relentless. Experts combed through the wreckage, trying to understand how something this catastrophic could happen inside one of the most advanced malls in the world. What they found was shocking. 4 cap screws, small, unassuming bolts, had failed, tearing apart the wheel assembly that kept the fourth car secured to the track. The design itself was flawed, and maintenance routines had missed warning signs. The ride had even made unusual noises earlier that evening, prompting operators to shut it down for inspection. But when empty trains ran smoothly, they reopened it. That decision proved fatal. In the aftermath, the Mindbender was shut down indefinitely. Engineers and safety inspectors worked for months to rebuild what had been broken, not just the coaster, but the trust of a nation. When it reopened in 1987, it was almost unrecognizable. The trains were shorter, reduced from 4 cars to 3. New safety restraints were added: shoulder harnesses, seat belts, anti-rollback systems, and extra wheel assemblies. Everything that could be reinforced was reinforced, but the shadow of that night never went away. For survivors like Rod Cho, the ride never truly ended. He lived, but with injuries that changed his life forever. For decades, he pleaded with the mall's owners to erect a memorial for the victims, for Tony, Cindy, and David, but his calls went unanswered. The screams from that night remained buried beneath layers of commercial glitter and music, the tragedy unspoken. For 36 more years, the Mindbender continued to operate. Generations of thrill-seekers climbed aboard, many unaware of the dark history that lived within those steel beams. And then, quietly, in January 2023, the ride was finally shut down for good. No ceremony, no announcement, just silence. The end of a legend that had once pushed the limits of excitement and, in doing so, crossed the line between thrill and terror. It was supposed to be just another day of excitement at Expoland, Osaka's beloved theme park that had brought joy to families for more than 3 decades. But on May 5, 2007, That joyful noise was replaced by something much darker. The Fujin Raijin 2 was one of the park's crown jewels, a daring stand-up roller coaster known for its incredible speed and rush of adrenaline. Riders would climb aboard expecting a minute of thrill, never imagining it could be their last. That day, a 19-year-old woman named Yoshino Kogawara took her seat, unaware that a hidden crack deep inside one of the coaster's axles had already sealed her fate. As the coaster roared around the track, disaster struck. One of the wheel assemblies broke loose, a catastrophic failure that caused the second car to tilt violently. Witnesses described a horrifying blur of motion as the train lurched off balance at nearly 120 kilometers per hour. Yoshino was thrown sideways, her head striking a metal guardrail with devastating force. In a split second, her life was over. 19 other riders were injured, many covered in cuts and bruises, their screams echoing across the park. The investigation that followed uncovered a nightmare of neglect. The cracked axle had gone unreplaced and uninspected for 15 years, even though visible signs of damage were there for anyone who cared to look. When investigators dug deeper, they found falsified maintenance records, proof that some park staff had knowingly ignored the danger. 3 employees were later charged with professional negligence causing death. Expoland tried to recover, reopening months later with promises of safety and change, but the magic was gone. Families no longer trusted the place where a young woman had lost her life. The laughter never returned. Over the next 2 years, visitor numbers plummeted. Empty walkways replaced the crowds. Sponsors pulled out. Eventually, the park shut its gates for good. We couldn't regain the people's trust, one Expoland spokesman admitted with quiet defeat. Today, the site where Fujin Raijin II once stood has been transformed into a retail complex. The only surviving reminder of its past is a lonely Ferris wheel, silent, still, and hauntingly symbolic. It was a bright summer morning in Stockholm. Families filled Gröna Lund, Sweden's oldest amusement park. Their excitement carried on the warm June breeze. But at 11:30 that morning, in the span of a few heartbeats, the joy turned to horror. The Jetline was one of Gröna Lund's pride rides, a towering steel monster that soared 30 meters into the air and screamed down the track at 90 kilometers per hour. For decades, it had thrilled visitors without incident. That day, 14 people climbed aboard, fastening their restraints, ready for an adrenaline rush. But as the coaster reached its peak, a sound sliced through the air. A sharp, metallic snap that no one could mistake. Witnesses later described seeing the track shudder violently, as if something deep within the ride had broken free. Then came the unthinkable. The front car lifted off the rails, twisting, tilting, and throwing passengers through the air. One woman in her 30s was thrown from the car and struck the ground below, dying instantly. Others screamed as the train lurched to a stop, suspended high above the ground. 9 more were injured, some critically, as chaos erupted around them. Parents grabbed their children. People ran in every direction. The sound of sirens filled the air as police and paramedics rushed in, weaving through the maze of rides and food stalls that had, just minutes before, been full of laughter. The park's CEO, Jan Eriksson, could barely speak as he addressed the media later that day. Something like this should not happen at Gröna Lund, he said quietly. And yet, it happened. He declared it a day of mourning, the first in the park's 140-year history. Journalist Jenny Lagerstedt was there that morning with her family. I heard a metallic noise, she later told Swedish broadcaster SVT. Then I saw the track shaking. My husband saw a roller coaster car with people in it, falling to the ground. Her voice broke as she recalled the moment. My children were terrified. When investigators began their search for answers, what they found was as chilling as it was preventable. The tragedy wasn't caused by age or random chance. It was due to newly installed support arms that simply weren't strong enough. The metal had failed under pressure, snapping apart and sending the coaster's wheels flying off the cart. A small design flaw, hidden deep inside the steel, had become the cause of death. For Gröna Lund, the heartbreak ran deep. The park shut down immediately, not for a day but indefinitely. Officials refunded every ticket, canceled every show, and closed the Jetline permanently, out of respect for the victim and her family. It's important we do everything we can to get to the bottom of this, spokeswoman Annika Troselius said at a press conference, her voice trembling. Sweden's culture minister, Parisa Liljestrand, called the news incomprehensible. Across the nation, people were stunned. Gröna Lund wasn't just a theme park. It was a summer tradition, a piece of childhood for generations. To see it turn into the site of such tragedy felt almost impossible to process. But the silence that followed spoke louder than words. Where laughter once echoed across the waterfront, only the soft hum of police drones remained. Flowers piled at the park's entrance, left by strangers who couldn't believe what had happened.